so excited to be here. I think this is a really exciting panel, and I'm really happy to be here with our guests. So my name, Jean Weingardner. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a white middle-aged woman with straight brown hair, wearing a pink shirt with a black jacket over it and glasses. Um, and I would like to invite our panelists to introduce themselves. We can start with you, Joyner.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Joyner. I am a white, fat, gender nonconforming person wearing large sunglasses and a black beanie hat. And I have a short red beard, and I'm wearing a black crew neck sweater. Um, I use any pronouns, can't get it wrong. And I'm really happy to be here today. I am an autistic person. I am the parent of two autistic kids, ages 22 and almost 11, who have very different support needs profiles. So I'm lucky enough to get a lot of different kinds of autistic parenting experiences.
Lou, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, my name is Lou Freitas. I am a white Caucasian woman with long, kind of messy blonde hair, wire-rimmed glasses. For some reason, my cheeks are really red, and my dress is light pink and dark pink swirls. I am from Connecticut, and I have two adult children who are autistic. One actually has Angelman syndrome and intellectual disabilities as well. He is 30. The younger one is 28. But I also work with a young man. Well, I say young man, he's 43, who has autism, who I've worked with for 29 years. And I have a lot of friends who are autistic and who are parents, and I come at it from a lot of different angles. First of all, the age gaps from 28 to 43, the way the world has changed. I just want to throw that out there. We've come a long way, but we got a long way to go. And also professionally, sometimes what I do professionally and what I do as a parent are different. So that's me. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lou. And last but very certainly not least, Natasha.
Hello, you handsome and gorgeous lie. I am a light bright, some might say racially ambiguous, but I think I have very black features, black woman. I have long burgundy and brown locks. I like to wear makeup because I like my face to be bright and vibrant. So there's a little bit of blush on my cheeks. My eyebrows are a little pronounced and my lips are brown with glitter on them. And I'm wearing a white t-shirt that says, "Hey, you need therapy," because I think that we all could use some. I am the parent to two autistic daughters. One is minimum speaking and has a bit more support needs. And then one is a vivacious, never quiet speaker like myself, who's also been touted as gifted. And so we navigate that. I myself am late diagnosed, meaning I got diagnosed after my children. And my husband is late diagnosed. And so we are a full autistic household. Um, and yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So we have a few questions for our panelists, and I would like to encourage you if um, you have a thought on what one of your fellow panelists is saying, please feel free to speak up. I'd love us to have a dialogue here. So the first question we have is, what is it like to be raising autistic people right now? What are the challenges you're facing? What feels supportive? And any of you want to start? Natasha, go right ahead.
Um, The best way to put this is exactly what we say in research, but I want to put it as in much layman terms as possible. It's difficult to raise autistic children and people because society isn't built for us, right? So we are in financial debt. We've had to put a HELOC on our home because we wanted to make sure that our children had occupational therapy, speech therapy, that our children were able to do adaptive swimming, that our children were supported for toileting therapy, which costs $13,000, that our children were supported when my daughter would need anything with food therapy, that we have an AAC device, right? Those type of things. Insurance is always fun. Deductibles are always fun. The co-pays are always fun. And so those things have made us financially in debt, and finding the information to support us as a family so that we would not be in financial debt is very scarce, or it's closed mouth and we didn't hear about it until this year. Like I heard about Katie Beckett waiver this year. And if you're not familiar with what the Katie Beckett waiver is, it's a waiver for middle-class families who don't qualify for Medicare but have children who are autistic or any type of disability, who have extra medical support needs. You can get a waiver to get Medicaid for your child. But you don't get told that a lot unless you know people. So for me, this has been difficult, but in the sense of societal support and resources has been the most difficult for us. But in our everyday life, my husband is taking my daughters to their adaptive ballet class at 4:30 today. Um, we have Tuesday was occupational therapy and speech day. And then we do one sport, and right now that's swim because we have an adaptive swim class. And my children go to school. One is in an ASD level 1 class, where she is just with children who have autism. And then one is in a regular what do they call it? General education class. And she gets pulled out for both her SPED social needs support and sensory support, and for her gifted classwork that she needs to do. We have assets and we have liabilities. We have challenges and gifts, just like any other family. The hardest part is navigating the financial and support resources for our family.
Thank you so much. Is there anything in particular that feels supportive from other people? Or we can move on to, it looks like Lou, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit to what Natasha said, because I'm glad she brought that up about the services and the AAC devices and all those things. And, people talk about us being patient as parents, and it's not because we just have to be patient with our children. We have to be patient with these systems. They're so slow to get any of the services. Or it is crazy. So you have to have a lot of patience with the paperwork and with the phone calls and everything else. And the other thing that she said that really resonated with me is, I also say the three main people in my life that I'm speaking about today had such very different school experiences, and people just don't get it. Like I said, professionally, people will say to me, "Oh, inclusion, inclusion, inclusion." And it's like, well, guess what? Inclusion is great if it's done correctly, but schools don't know how to do it correctly, right? Thank you, Natasha. It's so true. So I had one who was included perfectly. I had one that it was a struggle and a fight, but we got it done. And then I had one who was almost totally segregated because that's what he needed. So when people, I don't know, some people are just kind of judgy. It's just like you have to make everyone as comfortable and as successful as possible. Um, so thank you for saying that stuff. And the only thing I also wanted to mention is something else I was going to say. Wait, it popped out of my head. I think the building your village early. I think that's one thing that's so important and so hard. We have friends and family who we're close with. We have others we've had to distance from. You always unfortunately have those people that just don't get it and are not as flexible and is not as accepting. Whether it's at, parties or trying to plan family events. So I think you just really have to know who your people are.
Thank you. And Joyner, do you have anything to add?
Yeah. Um, what Lou and Natasha have said is so relevant. Um, I live in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, and we are lucky to have pretty comprehensive home and community-based disability services. So when Natasha mentioned a Katie Beckett waiver, here they're just called waivers. There's lots of different kinds of them. I received my own services through a waiver, and then my younger child has been on a waiver since he was 3 years old. Um, I absolutely agree with what Natasha said about it's not information that's disseminated to folks. In fact, I work, this is a little bit interesting, I think. I work professionally in the education space. I'm on the Minneapolis School Board. And then I work a lot of volunteer doing nonprofit work and legislative advocacy in the human services side of things. And it's amazing how siloed education and human services are from each other. And I think that's likely true across the country. So even though my younger child, the one who's almost 11, I blog. I have a tiny little but long-term blog called Neuromess, and my child, my almost 11-year-old's name is Foxy. So if that rings a bell for anyone on the internet, that's who we are. And even though he started receiving special ed services through our district at age 2, nobody that we worked with through special ed told us that we could see if he qualified through human services for a waiver or any other of that type of service. And I later found it is because if a school system, if a public system of education identifies a need, then the public system of education who identified the need is responsible for meeting the need because the funding is so siloed. So if the school district says your kid needs X, you should try to go to the government and see if you can get it from human health and services. They could be legally on the hook. I could come back as a parent and said, hey, you documented that you identified this need for my child, you have to pay for it. And so there's this like the lines shall not cross kind of situation, such that these two systems don't necessarily know a lot about each other. That's something that I'm always trying to work on. But because we have it's wild because compared with many places in the nation, it's super functional. However, it's still not at all enough or what families need. But we do have comparatively good home and community based services here. And there is a consumer directed option so that as a parent and a representative party for my child, I can get a budget for him. And then within the constraints of what's legally allowed, I can direct those funds. So we can hire our own PCA or DSP staff. We can determine for ourselves what modifications need to be made to our home for safety and access, and then fund those. There is, of course, a process to get every line item approved. But when my child was initially assessed, he was at 2 years old, he was referred to center-based full-time ABA. And that was not something that we wanted to do for our child. We didn't think it would be a fit for our family or aligned with our family culture. We're a poor family. And any poor family who is receiving any kind of government services is going to be surveyed like many other families are surveyed by systems. And so once they say your kid needs 25 to 40 hours a week of ABA in a center, and you say, no, we're not going to do that, you're creating risk for yourself and for your family and for your child. Um, because if your kid ever gets into any kind of a situation where there is harm to anyone or where there is any sort of damage to property, they can always come back and say, we assessed this need, we identified what was needed, we were going to pay for it, and the family said no, right? And that creates significant legal liability. So, as I think about the time over the past 9 years since that initial assessment was made about my child, and since using sort of patchworking together services to support him. And this is my child who's mentally speaking, needs hands on care 24/7, a lot of support, like you were talking about, Natasha and Lou. Um, it's not a child who can go without support services. It's not like if you don't do ABA you just do nothing, right? We have to then figure out what is our network of services, and in some ways that's a gift because you can build community, you can innovate with people, you can like really grow your own skill in terms of being a community member, providing care, and being part of a network of care. These are skills we're going to need more and more in the future of this country. And so there's a gift there, but it's also not easy. Like nobody helped us actually figure out what to do. We had to take sort of the resources that were available to us, cut them apart, sew them back together, hope they work. And it is getting to feel for me more and more dangerous and risky to not just go with the party line of stick your kid in a center, stick your kid in a home, stick your kid in an institution. Um, it feels it feels like what I have to do to keep my kid safe and as protected from trauma as I possibly can also creates a risk. And it's a little bit of a rock and a hard place. And I don't know that that reality and the stress as a parent of living under that reality is very visible to society at large, even if my child's disability is very visible to them.
Natasha, you had a response?
Absolutely. So a point that Joanna made with all of that is I want to add to that, we are diagnosed. We probably have some privileges that allowed us to get an actual official diagnosis. But we know what the research says about autism. This is in our genetics. There's a lot of executive function that comes with being a parent and caregiver of anyone with any type of disability, right? But we're dealing with what people label as invisible disabilities, right? And people question it and don't, and all of the things. And so for you as a parent, the executive function of having that calendar where you have to know, you have to figure out the speech therapy, the occupational therapy, the music therapy, and then you have to figure out what insurance is going to cover that. And then you have to figure out what your deductible is. And then you have to keep up with appointments and keep on pediatricians and keep on the school and keep up with the 3-year evaluation. And then the waiver program has certain things that are outside of your scope that you will need, but you have the waiver, and so you need them. And it's on and continuous. And if you yourself have autism, ADHD, you drop the ball sometimes. And then there's a tax. I call it the disability tax of having to remake those appointments and pay that $25 cancellation fee because you forgot, oh, I forgot we had that one meeting and I'm at another meeting, and all of the things that come on the caregiver, whether they are any type of autistic or not, is overwhelming, right? But with the research that we know, most of the time they do have autism or ADHD, and that is overwhelming. And not to mention, if you're like myself, Joiner, and you're doing that for yourself, because I myself have occupational therapy and group therapy and all of the things. And it is overwhelming. It is a full-time job. And unless you know, like again, what me and Joyner talked about, unless you're in the know and someone tells you, you don't even know how to get paid for it. And if you do, it is a whole process in itself and a whole packet in itself and a whole system in itself to even get paid to be a caregiver for your child. I'm very blessed that I am a veteran. And so I get my disability pay from being a veteran, and that allows me to be the primary caregiver and do all these appointments while my husband works, but that's not every household situation. And so you could have a single parent who works full time, who still has to keep up with all those appointments, who still has to do all that research, who still has to apply for all of those programs.
Thank you, Natasha. Luke.
I just also wanted to point out what Natasha's saying really hits me hard because our Proud Parents group, we have a lot of parents, whether they have autism or an intellectual disability or anything else, feel also it's so discriminatory, Child Protective Services, and they feel under a microscope. So, like Natasha said, she makes that mistake, they're all over her. I make that mistake, maybe not so much. You know, I'm white, supposedly neurotypical, and I do recognize that. And it just, we really have to fight the discrimination there.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
my child, we my family was extremely lucky to get a Section 8 housing choice voucher when he was 4. And we moved from the single family home we'd been renting since he was born into a large apartment complex. And resultant of that, he became unable to leave our home. The network of hallways, elevators, parking garages was so impossible for him to be able to even be exposed to that for 5 years, he was not able to go outside. And the only way that we were able to help mitigate that after trying medications, psychiatrists, tons and tons of in-home therapy, school support, all the things, was to move, to buy a home so that he would have an exit that went right from our house out onto the front sidewalk in a single family home, and gave up our Section 8 housing choice voucher, which is an extreme safety net for a family like ours with multiple disabled members, but it's what our child needed. And so that's what we had to do. But I mean, similar to what Natasha was saying earlier, the way that you have to sort of arrange your life and your material resources around your children is it can be very intense and overwhelming. And I think it's fair to say that. And I think our kids deserve it. And when we chose to have kids, we signed up to take care of the kids that we have. And it's not something bad that happened to me, my kids, and I never feel that way. And it is hard to live in a society where we have to make such specific, directed decisions about our time, about our activities, and about our resources that center our children's disability needs 100% of the time. And not have the kind of societal or community support inherent for that lived reality. The one other thing that I would want to say that just kind of changes the subject just a little bit is in terms of parenting, is how important my child's self-concept is to me. How, when I'm thinking about what types of services we might choose, when I'm thinking about how we want to interact with our child as parents, when I'm thinking about the types of advocacy that I do in school systems or human services systems, I think often first about how important it is to me that my child understands himself to be beautiful, to be loved, to be valuable, to be skilled. Part of this is because I want him, like there is a protective value to that. I want him to have the benefits of a positive self-concept. Part of it is because as he grows up and becomes more and more of a self-advocate, I want him to be advocating from his whole chest, to know what he deserves, to not feel self-conscious about asking or requesting what he needs. And part of it is just because it's the truth. He is beautiful. He is valuable. He is loved. He is skilled. He has made our lives so much better than we could have hoped when we learned we were having a baby. And so that's kind of whenever I am sort of thinking about what lens I want to put up first when I'm considering a decision we might be making about my child. That's always going to be one of the very first lenses that I put forth is what impact is this likely to have on his self-concept? And if I think something may harm his self-concept, make him doubt himself, make him think that the way he is not okay, make him think that the way he does things is not okay. Of course, we always want to support learning new skills, growing, having new experiences, nothing wrong with that. But that comes from a place of what you're doing is already great and let's expand on it versus don't do that, that's wrong. You need to be a different way instead. So I just want to throw that out there in the parenting realm.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's so important. Natasha?
So Joyner just brought something that is actually fairly recent to my heart. So we have literally within the last 2 days just had a massive blow up where we had to cut off a family member because of how they spoke about autism. And that family member was actually staying, we are a multi-generational household. And so we have allowed different family members to stay with us because we own our house. And as we know, this country is in kind of financial disarray right now, especially for minorities and disabled people. And so we've let different family members come and stay with us. But the connotation that the person was using when they talked about autism was already rubbing me and my husband wrong, but this person is a very close relative, right? And so we tried to do the teaching, we tried to model the positive talk. We are autistic. Autistic has nothing to do with intelligence. It is a developmental disorder. It has to do with sensory, executive function, social and emotional regulation, motor skills, these type of things, right? So we gave the whole class. I have the PowerPoints. I teach this. And it was still, and so in cultures, especially minority cultures, where there hasn't been that much effort in educating them about autism, it is a very regressive talk of slow and of but when I came out and said I was autistic, it was like, but I thought you were fine. I said I am fine. I am also autistic. And so there's things like that, and it just kind of blew up to me melting down and saying, okay, but you're still saying nothing's wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with autism. So, and then us having to remove that person from our house who we were helping for the protection of our daughters, because we don't want anyone in that household speaking negatively or bringing a negative connotation to autism. We are all autistic. It is what it is. We have gifts and we have challenges, just like the average person, and our brains just work differently. And in our house, in our universe, we support ourselves. And then when we go out into the rest of the universe, we support each other to deal with that, and we tell people how to deal with that. But if you can't get with that, even if you are mother, you are cousin, you are aunt, you gotta go. And that's very hard and very lonely to stick to that ideology. And so that's something that we don't talk about for parents and caregivers who are maybe anti-ABA and really about person first, and just openly. We talk about autism every day, and it's just in random stuff. We're like, oh, she's having sensory issues. That's definitely sensory seeking. Or, oh, that's some sensory avoidance. Or, oh, my bad. Executive function beat my butt again. I didn't remember. Like, we talk about it in our everyday language, and people get uncomfortable immediately. Here they go with that autistic stuff. And I'm like, I don't want that in my home. I don't want that idea prevailing with my children. I want my children comfortable in who they are. And that has left us with having to cut out a lot of family and friends and important people in our lives. So it can be lonely for parents and caregivers who are sticking to their guns and wanting to raise their child in that ideology that Jonah so beautifully put.
It's really beautiful to hear from parents like you all to how you're raising your kids to be
Can I
proud.
just say, Natasha, I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. That sounds so hard.
It is. Even now, I asked my husband because it's through him, and I was like, are they safe? Do they have a place to stay? And he said, honestly, I don't know, because I reached out to try to ask that, and it was still negative talk that bordered on ableism, and I just blocked. And so we don't even know if they're okay, and they are family, but we're not going to put up with that in our home.
Yeah, and I as well had a situation with close family members, especially when the kids were younger, where they would invite, I have 6 children, and they would literally invite the neurotypical kids to a birthday party. And it's like, what? Oh, well, Juan won't like that. Like, how do you know? Not only that, you still invite us all. We are all. It's so hurtful. And people are just so ignorant. They don't even realize it sometimes. So, like you said, you have cutting out people, you have trying to educate people. You have to kind of weigh it. And it makes it really tough. I've had situations where that happens, and I purposely get Matt, the young man I work with, and we'll show up. We would show up with all 7 of them, like here we are. So yeah, that's hard.
Um, if I can just jump in really quick, this is Jules from ASAN. Hi. Um, I think we have about 10 minutes left, and I think the next question that we were going to have for you, I think y'all have already been addressing really beautifully. I'm wondering if it would be okay for us to take 1 or 2 audience questions because there are some good ones in here. And just from what you just brought up, Lou, I think this is a great one. Somebody said, I am a neurotypical parent of an ADHD child. I'm disabled with chronic illness, though, so I immediately need to go to the people with lived experience. A huge thank you to autistic adults who gave their time and who I learned from. You have made a difference in my child's life. My question is about friends. My 14-year-old daughter wants them, but it is a struggle. I have some things we have tried, but I sure could use help. I'm making this anonymous for my child's privacy. So yeah, any thoughts y'all have about like supporting your kids in making friends?
So it's going to be difficult depending on where you are, right? Because certain areas have absolutely nothing. And then certain areas have actual programs where they're for autistic teens and autistic young adults. Like here in Atlanta, Emory has a program. I'm trying to remember the name. I believe it's called Lifetime or Life for Autism. But what they do is they have groups. So there's an anime group, there's I like to go out and walk and see nature group, and it's just autistic teens and young adults who all meet up in those groups doing things that are in their interest to see and meet different people like them. But let's say I don't want to assume that you're in an Atlanta or a major city. Let's say you're in a rural area. I'm going to tell you to reach out to those autistic adults that you were talking to and see if some of them have children. Or when you're going to the different therapies, seeing if some of the other parents there are dealing with the same issues as you. I found that one of my children in particular does best with other neurodivergent children. Doesn't necessarily have to be autism. She just does better with children who are wired differently than her, who have that creative spark, who don't just fall into the norm. And so I'll find those parents and be like, hey, I'll make that extra effort. I have made a sensory playroom in my house. So I'm like, hey, maybe you have health issues. Maybe you can't go anywhere. You come to my house and they can just play in the sensory playroom for an hour and spend some time together. Right. So sometimes I think Joyner, no, I think it was Lou. Either Lou or Joyner talked about how we signed up as parents to do this and it's hard, but sometimes we go the extra step. A lot of times my autistic behind is having to make friends with parents and caregivers that I really wouldn't normally do for my child, because it's like, hey, you have a child who loves book reading and making comics, but doesn't like hanging with a lot of kids. And so do I. Maybe they could parallel play and make their comics together, and maybe we can parallel play and you can just do what you want to do and I'll read my book because I really don't want to sit down and pretend I care about your life. But but I make that extra effort for my children. So that's one of the things I would tell you is when you're in those support groups, those family groups, those autistic adult groups, finding other people who have teens, because a lot of us are having the same issues.
Awesome. Lou?
I just wanted to add to that. That's great. Like you said, you just can't always like all the other parents, even in schools, whether it's the, PTO or whatever. But I just wanted to say that I also we all feel that pressure as a parent in general, right? Um, but I think I would rather see my child have one really good friend, like a real friend, than have 10. They're more like acquaintances. So that was it in a nutshell.
I'll just add,
Yeah.
I
Oh, I'm
think,
sorry, Joanna. Go.
oh, thanks, Natasha. Um, I think if you can find, and nothing is going to apply to every child or every person, right? But I think there can be some really magical activities. Having an interest-based friendship can work really well for autistic people. Natasha was kind of talking about this. Um, because it provides some scaffolding. You know what you're going to talk about. You already have some shared language. You already have some shared sort of bases of knowledge. There are things to talk about. Whereas sometimes autistic people, we have to construct so much of that from scratch if we're kind of going in cold, and it can be really vulnerable. It can be really exhausting. And we get it wrong. I get it wrong a lot. And then I'm embarrassed, right? So, I know when I was this when I was a kid, right, back in the early 90s, late 80s, um, I was on a bowling league for other kids my age. And that was great because it was independent, right? I walked up and I threw my bowling ball and I had my independent score, but I was on a team with three other kids and we met every Saturday morning as part of our bowling league. And it was a really great fit for me as an autistic kid because I had enough social interaction, but I still was sort of doing my own thing versus like team sports that I tried, like t-ball and soccer. Those were a lot harder because I had to be coordinating with a lot of other people all the time. And that was not a fit for me. For my now 22-year-old at that age, it was Yu-Gi-Oh, that card game, that was popular then, right? Because we could go out to Yu-Gi-Oh tournaments, and whether the other participants were neurodivergent or not, they knew the roles and the routines for interacting were there, and he could just sort of like slot himself in. So I think finding those types of activities, if they exist for your kid, I love to have friends who are colleagues. Now, obviously, you have to be very aware of like work boundaries and these types of things. But because if we, go out for a bite to eat or something, I already know what we're going to talk about. I already know who they are. We already have our roles. I think those types of friendships can be really accessible for a lot of autistic people.
Definitely. Jules, did you have another question? We probably have time for one more question. We have about 3 minutes, so quick answer from each of you.
I
Natasha,
realized
did
I
you
put
want
it in
to?
the
Yeah.
chat.
Oh, I'm
Yeah,
so
but
sorry.
I just realized it says host and panel. So I just realized the whole group can't see it. And I think it's really important. I think it's important to point out those of us who have always struggled to make friends, we really can't deal with too many friends. When I tried to have multiple friends, I was not a good friend. I was overwhelmed. There's so many rules. You can't say this isn't kind. All of the things, it was overwhelming for me. I now have a rule of three. I can have one best friend and two close friends because there are rules of checking in on your friend, of being there if your friend needs you for support. Those things, I only have the bandwidth and space to do that for like two or three people at times. So sometimes that one good friend who you share that interest is all we need because we're usually in our own worlds with our own special interests going forward. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Natasha. I think we probably don't have time for another question, but I did just want to give the opportunity for our panelists really quickly. Some of y'all run fantastic organizations, some of y'all are public servants. Is there anything that you want to like plug or that you would like people to check out? And we can make sure that any links to your various organizations get shared out and put in the description of the YouTube video when we post the recording of this. Natasha, can we start with you?
So, outside of being all the things I told you that I am, I'm a certified positive discipline educator in homes, in early childhood education centers, and in classrooms. And then I also work with Emory and Marcus Autism Center, and I educate pediatricians on how to diagnose unambiguous signs of autism and how to support that family. And then I also work with the Spark Foundation in encouraging minorities and people who are outside of cis males to sign up for research in autism, because a lot of times it is just white males, cis white male, middle class centered, and there's not a lot of research on girls, on non-binary people, on minorities in themselves, and we need that in order to have the resources and data and funding. We need that research. But I also do a free, I want to say this again, it is sponsored by the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, as well as the Color of Autism, 9-week parenting class that I do 4 times a year. The next one is coming up in the fall. It is teaching positive discipline while you have neurodivergent children or children with mental health vulnerabilities or intellectual and developmental disabilities. It teaches how to understand the diagnosis, how to work with your doctor, how to get resources, but also how to incorporate positive discipline in your household. And you can sign up. I'm sure we're going to offer them the links. I'll put the link in the chat for everyone, and I'll send it to the rest of my panelists.
Amazing. Thank you. Lou, I saw you put the Proud Parents link in the chat. Everyone definitely go check that out. Joiner, is there anything you would like to plug real quick?
Yeah, I do blog. I've been blogging at Neuromess, which is just on Facebook, for about 8 years. And I don't blog a lot, but there's a lot of really great content there if you look back. AAC, parenting, neurodiversity, education, IEP stuff. So you can throw that in there. And then I sit on the board of directors for the Autism Society of Minnesota, which is the biggest and oldest autism nonprofit in the state of Minnesota. And it is over 50 years old. So it's gone through a lot of iterations and changes over the years, but it has full autistic leadership on the board of directors at this point in time. Tons of the staff who work for the organization are autistic. Almost all of them, I think, are neurodivergent or disabled. And it's actually one of the best resources in the country for autistic adults, specifically with a lot of programming for autistic adults. But we also really prioritize working closely with our East African immigrant families, Somali and Oromo families in Minnesota, which is a population that needs and deserves a lot of support. And so so you could definitely link the Autism Society of Minnesota if you would like to do that.
Incredible. Jean, did you want to say anything else to close us out?
No, I just wanted to thank all 3 of you for being here. It was really great to hear your perspectives and very helpful.
Yeah, thank you all so much. We're going to take about a 3 or 4 minute break to transition to our next panel, which is going to focus on kind of experiences from the self-advocate side, talking about what it was like to be parented as an autistic person. Stick around and we'll start a little bit after 50 minutes after the hour. Thank you so much. Dr. Huff, can I start with you?
Yeah, hi, I'm Dr. Destiny Huff. I am a Black woman with short black twists and a silver nose stud, red glasses, and I'm wearing a black shirt that says protecting my peace one boundary at a time. Um, I am late diagnosed autistic and ADHD. I'm also a mental health therapist and non-attorney special education advocate, and I have 2 neurodivergent children that are currently in elementary education.
Awesome. Cole, can I kick it to you?
I can go while Cole is writing or typing. I'm AJ. I'm a black dude in a black shirt and a black hat with a graying beard. I am autistic. I have a little kid who I don't know whether or not they are autistic yet. But pretty cool kid. And I used to work at ASAM. I think that's all.
Okay. My name is Cole Sorensen. I use he, him pronouns. I am a young white person with short dark hair and glasses. I wrote this in advance, but there's a good chance I'm rocking back and forth in my chair or otherwise fidgeting. and I'm also using a tablet as a communication device. And I didn't prepare much more to say about myself in advance. But in my day job, I work doing public policy type work around disability and employment. And I've done a lot of work with youth in different ways.
Awesome. Thank you all. So grateful to have you, all of you here with us today. Um, so, um, next question, um, is kind of a three-parter. But what was your experience like growing up autistic? And, even if you weren't diagnosed as a kid, looking back, what was that like? We would especially like to know what kind of support was helpful to you and what wasn't helpful as you were growing up. Is there anyone who would like to start?
This is AJ. I can go first. As someone who wasn't diagnosed as a kid, I didn't get any real support that I think would have been helpful. Knowing that I was autistic, I faced a lot of behavioral consequences and a lot of frustration, not understanding why I didn't fit in, why I didn't think like other people, why I didn't want to do things that other people wanted to do. And I think it would have been really cool as a Black child in mostly white or PWI institutions, knowing that I was autistic and getting that support rather than being labeled as problematic. I think that shaped how I view the world and authority. And yeah, I think I had really supportive parents and that they were always encouraging about being myself. But at the same time, I think they struggled a lot as young parents with an autistic child that they didn't know was autistic and the frustration that can come with that and the behavioral issues I had.
And AJ, just real quick, can you explain a little bit what PWI means just for people who might not know?
Oh yeah, I'm so sorry. I live in DC and use acronyms. I grew up going to predominantly white schools in upper middle class suburbia, and so oftentimes I was one of few or the only Black child in those spaces, and oftentimes I was labeled as troublesome or problematic. One, because I was Black and behaved differently, but two, because I was autistic and behaved differently, unbeknownst to the adults who were responsible for my education.
Thank you. Cole, would you like to share your response to that question?
Yeah.
I wrote a fair bit. When I think about what kind of support would have been the most helpful to me when I was growing up, I think the thing that would have made the biggest difference would have been someone who could have really looked at what my behavior and actions were communicating, looked at the patterns and what I struggled with and what might be behind that, and explained that to the adults in my life in a way they would understand. I'm definitely not talking about something like a functional behavior assessment of taking a bunch of data about my behavior and using that to say that I was trying to escape a non-preferred activity or whatever. That would not have gotten me anywhere. What I'm talking about is more. I wish someone would have paid attention, and when I acted in an unexpected way or wasn't able to do something, I wish they would have sat down and tried to figure out why. I would have wanted support that started from the assumption that I did not want to be difficult, and that I was doing the best I could with what I had available to me. With a lot of the specific challenges I faced growing up, communication was a big part of it, but I don't think anyone realized the extent to which I had trouble communicating. Both speaking and writing were fairly unreliable for me, and there were a lot of things I had no way to communicate through words or even actions. For example, for around a year and a half when I was between the ages of 11 and 12, I very badly needed glasses, but did not have a way of communicating that. I knew I needed glasses. I knew it was an issue not to be able to see more than 3 feet in front of me, and I did in fact want them, too. But I didn't have a way to communicate it. If someone had noticed and asked me directly, I could absolutely have told them that I could barely see, but nobody did. So I just had to put up with it until a routine vision screening at school finally caught the issue. There were some things I could communicate on my own. Many things I could only communicate if someone directly prompted or asked, and other things I didn't have a way to express at all. I'm honestly not sure exactly what types of communication support would have been helpful for that. My communication difficulties weren't so much with the physical act of speaking as they were with putting together the words and actually initiating communication. Nowadays, I use a communication device often, which can help me get over a lot of the blocks I'd otherwise have. But it took a lot of time and skill building to get to a point where I could reliably get my thoughts into even written words. I still would have liked to have been given the option back then to try a system like what I use today, though, as one option along with others. Direct questions did help a lot when I was younger, and so did sentence prompts, like having one person give me the first few words of a sentence so I could fill in the rest. But I think the most important thing would have been for people to recognize that if I wasn't communicating, that did not mean I didn't have anything to say. I would have wanted people to get creative and experiment with different strategies so I could express myself more fully. One other type of support that was helpful to me was having adults in my life who I could trust and who would get to know me. I did best with people who had a really calm presence and who actively tried to get to know me without being pushy about it. A lot of people looked at me and saw a kid who did not really initiate much interaction, and they assumed that either I should just be left alone, or otherwise they'd go really over the top trying to joke around with me in ways that left me very overwhelmed. The best relationships I had with adults growing up was the teachers who would invite me to sit in their classroom during lunch, who deliberately created an opportunity for us to get to know each other at my pace, who asked me some questions and told me about themselves, but also let me just sit there quietly and eat when I wanted. One of those teachers, in 11th grade, was the one who helped me find a few strategies I could use to put more complex thoughts into writing. One thing all these adults had in common was that they talked to me like a person, not like a peer, by any means. They were in a much different stage of life than me and in a position of power, but they did treat me like someone with a full internal experience, and like someone who had my own thoughts and opinions about the world around me, even when I was very young. Even if there were some things in my head I couldn't share with them, I did at least know that they saw me as a human being and wanted to get to know me as I was, rather than changing me into someone different, and that made a big difference for me.
Thank you so much, Cole. So much to think about there. That was really phenomenal. Thank you. Dr. Huff.
Yeah, I think for me it was I was a military brat. So I grew up with exposure to a lot of different races and ethnicities and cultures. And then when I got when I went to a PWI, so I knew I knew what AJ meant by that. That's what I went to for college. That was almost like a shock of like not being around so many different cultures at first in those interactions. But I was an internalizer. And so there was no external behaviors to look at on the outside and outside of my house. I was like, I was compliant. I was getting all the grades. I was checking all the boxes. But then I was battling depression and anxiety because I was internalizing. And so my parents, who I say all day now, they are neurodivergent themselves. They were also very young as well, young parents. My mom had me when she was 18. So looking at the support aspect, like I grew up with my parents, and then my sister is 4 years younger than me. So when I think about like support, I think that my parents did the best that they could. They created an environment where me and my sister could come talk to them, even though it was still very solution focused. And they were just like, here's a hug, now let's figure it out. But they were very involved in supporting us academically. And then I think for me, it would have been just kind of digging deeper because I think a lot of autistic female born and presenting individuals we internalize and so it gets missed, and so then we get to college or we get out of high school and then there's a lot of heavy depression and anxiety and all the other things that come with it, and then that's when people start to see, okay, what's really going on, like there's something deeper. So the support that I would have liked um was like, recognize the perfectionism and kind of like, hey, you don't have to be perfect. Not like, oh, it's great, you're doing everything perfectly. Because for me, that was ending up being a big issue for me. Um, like I was the kid that asked why, and it was constantly getting pushback. Like, why are you asking why? So like, I would have liked to like just answer the question, like, what's wrong with understanding why something is happening? I don't see why that's a problem. And so it was great to hear AJ and Cole and their perceptions and perspectives because I then subsequently had a autistic son that had externalized behavior and responses, and I do get his perspective on things and I do share his perspective with his teachers, and me and my husband do create this home environment where he is able to authentically be himself and we support him in the other settings. So it was really nice to hear their perspectives and what they were hoping for and what I think I'm providing for my autistic son now.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good point too, Dr. Huff, about like thinking about autistic experiences, some people having more internalized experiences and more external. And I think it's common for, like you said, for people who are assigned female at birth, who present more femme, to just have those more internalized signs missed. So, yeah, thank you for sharing that. Next question for folks. What do you think is most important for parents of autistic people to know right now?
I think the biggest thing being an advocate that I see in being a mental health professional, and being a parent. And so even though myself and my son are considered low support needs, I support families across the spectrum. And so one of the things I think that parents need to know right now is that like lived experience is your best educator. I think that a lot of parents are dealing with a lot of noise from the current administration and the current times, and family and friends are bringing in noise too. And I think it's important to search out lived experience of the specific way in which your autistic child presents. I think that is just so important. Like, if my child uses an AAC device, then am I learning from people that use AAC devices? Like, if my child has a lot of external dysregulation, am I learning from people who had external presentations as a child with dysregulation or internal presentations? Or I think that's the piece that I really want parents to understand is like find lived experience, and it's out there because of social media. So it does exist that there are people that you feel on an island. That's how I felt when my son was diagnosed. And then I looked and I was like, oh, there's a whole Autism in Black organization. um, so you feel on an island, but if you go and look, you'll find that there are people talking about autistic people talking about their experience in those different areas and giving you insight into what they felt as a child to help you kind of prevent, to be quite honest, some of the damage that we experienced as children.
Yeah, thank you for that. AJ, do you have thoughts to share on that?
So many, but I would say it's really important that we are aware of being in solidarity with autistic people, autistic parents, and parents of autistic folks, and telling people how to parent. It's such a fine line. And like I hate RFK. I hate the Trump administration. I hate the vaccine skeptics. But I think one of the most important things, maybe the fundamental thing, and Dr. Destiny talked about this, is you're not alone. There is a community. Hopefully people are finding the right communities, because you can go down rabbit holes and be radicalized into anti-autistic extremism. And not that they are the same thing, and not to equate them at all, but even into like Aspie supremacy and all those types of things. I thought Dr. Destiny's breakdown of internalizing and externalizing was really cool. As someone who was depressed and had mental health incidents, issues, disabilities, whatever term folks want to use, until I was diagnosed as autistic, and that gave me a lot of sense of clarity and help with a lot of my depression and my suicidal ideation, things like that. Like, I completely understand that. And finding community, all that is to say, like, finding community is so incredibly helpful when people feel isolated or alone, or that they don't have help or solidarity. It's so difficult, especially as parents. Think about all the different type of parents there are: single parents, parents who are living in poverty, parents who don't have access to resources to help their children. All that can be really frustrating and daunting and scary, and so many other adjectives. And so, yeah, my one thing, if I could give anything, is like, you are not alone, and there is community, there is support. And I hope that people who are looking for that find it.
Thank you, AJ. I just want to shout out Natasha put in the chat a link to the organization Autism in Black. Autism in Black is a neurodivergent-led organization uniquely dedicated to serving the Black autistic community. We go beyond general advocacy. Our lived experience allows us to bridge the gap between awareness and action, providing culturally responsive education, empowerment, and support that reduces harm. Thank you for sharing that, Natasha. Cole.
Yeah. For anyone here who's heard me present before, it will come as no surprise that what I think is most important is for parents of autistic people to understand is the concept of dignity of risk. Dignity of risk is the idea that everyone has the right to take risks and make mistakes, even if those risks can end badly. If we prevent a person from being able to take reasonable risks in their life, we prevent them from the opportunity to learn from their mistakes, to grow as a person, and to live the life they want to live. Sometimes when I talk about this idea of dignity of risk, people assume that what I am advocating for is never stepping in and addressing potential dangers someone might face because of their choices, no matter how serious those dangers might be. There are absolutely times where someone's choice poses enough of a risk of serious harm that you need to step in and intervene. If your friend is drunk and about to get behind the wheel of a car, for instance, it would be a very appropriate response to take away their keys. When it comes to the spectrum of risky decisions, there are a small number like that which are pretty cut and dry, too serious of a risk for anyone and something that should be avoided at all costs. But the vast majority of potentially risky decisions have a lot of gray area, where the level of risk varies based on the situation, the environment, the tools available, and the knowledge, skills, and abilities of the person or people involved. Notice that I just listed a whole lot more things that factor into determining what makes a reasonable risk than just a person's own abilities. And yet, so often, that's the only piece that ends up being considered when decisions are getting made over what level of risk is reasonable for someone with a disability to be allowed to take. By only considering the one factor of a person's abilities, you are missing all the factors which are much easier to change and which have the potential of turning a major risk into a reasonable one. Pretty much every decision carries with it some degree of risk. Think of a big decision, like moving to a new state. That risks plenty of things, from the financial risks associated with moving to the social and emotional risks that come with suddenly finding yourself far from any friends, family, and communities you used to rely on. But even the smallest decision, like what clothes to put on in the morning, carries risks too. Maybe you choose the wrong clothes for the weather and spend the whole day sweltering. Or maybe you put on your favorite white shirt only to later spill a full plate of spaghetti on yourself. But taking these risks are essential for learning and growing, even if they end up going badly. There are a lot of different things we learn through making mistakes. The lessons we learn through making mistakes tend to stick a whole lot better than just having someone tell us not to do something. Mistakes also teach us a lot of problem-solving skills. When mistakes happen, we need to figure out how to deal with the fallout and how to minimize the damage and fix things as best we can. We learn things like who to reach out to for help and how to communicate what we need in a way people will understand and respond to. We learn how to break a big issue down into smaller steps in order to start tackling things. We learn how to patch up relationships and make amends with people when that's needed. And we learn how to do all of this while also balancing the emotions that resulted from the bad outcome of the risk we took. Those situations come with a lot of feelings, often strong ones. We might feel disappointment, fear, grief, anger, or many other things, often many of those at once. Navigating those emotions is not easy, and navigating them while also trying to get yourself to do what needs to happen is even harder. And this is a skill, one that develops through practice. People learn how to do these things throughout a lifetime of taking risks, making mistakes, and figuring out ways to move forward when things don't go as planned, over and over. Each experience like that builds our ability to navigate those types of situations in the future. These are not innate skills that people are born knowing how to do. They're things that each person develops through practice, and they are something that every single person is capable of, even if different people need different types of support to do so. And supporting your loved one to have those experiences, starting as early as possible, is one of the very best things you can do to set them up so they feel confident and supported in making their own choices about what they want for their life and their future.
Thank you,
Well, can I
Cole.
say something?
Yeah,
One,
go
I
for it.
keep forgetting, but Cole, your voice is one of the most amazing and unique voices. And I've heard a lot of voices, and I love it. And then two, I think your point about risk is so important. I like to talk to my wife about our child and creating artificial adversity and in a safe environment you were talking about, because I am so pro providing risk and opportunity to problem solve. And so I feel like that is just a universal thing and shouldn't just be for disabled or autistic
Yeah.
children. Like creating that opportunity to really hurt yourself, I think, and obviously a safe-ish way is so important. So add those two things, and I'll stop talking.
Thank you, AJ. That's a great point. And I think, like one thing that influences a child's access to those risky situations is like their how isolated they are or how integrated they are with other kids, right? Like we have, a lot of autistic kids who see or kids with other disabilities who are in special ed programs who are totally isolated from the general student population. They're not getting the the social experiences and those opportunities to take social risks. Oh, it's a cat. Um, and that's really like a disservice to kids in that way too. So yeah, thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. Um, I did want to um, ask a question specifically for Dr. Huff and AJ. Um, if folks saw we put out some resources about what's happening with the Interagency Autism Coordinating Committee, which is a kind of group of both people who work for federal agencies and also public members who provide feedback to the government about how the government should spend money on autism research. And this round of the IAC has only three self-advocates who are public members, and none of the public members are people of color. Can you speak to why it's so important um, for not just self-advocate voices to be represented, but particularly self-advocate voices of color in these spaces? And yeah, just I guess any thoughts you have about that situation.
Yeah, I think for me it's that, right, so I'm raising two black sons, and they're seen as black before they're seen as autistic or ADHD. So I have one autistic son and one ADHD son. And my husband's a black male, and he's ADHD. And so I think, the disability community and the black community share a lot in, social justice and civil rights and advocacy and trying to just be heard and have access and all those pieces. And I think that it's not until you are a part of both communities that you see the ableism and the racism. And I think one of the things that Black people in general are always arguing for is like, just like walk beside us, listen to us, understand. And then when you are also autistic or ADHD or have a disability, you're now having to not only receive acceptance from your own community, which we have a history of keep things in house, don't talk about it. I've met many Black autistics who clearly have autistic people in their family that we just didn't really talk about. We just don't make it a thing, like, right? And so I think sometimes in disability spaces, there's this really big neuroaffirming push, and I say this as a neuroaffirming advocate, neuroaffirming push of like recognizing access and accessibility and honoring all forms of communication, which is amazing, and validation and acceptance and understanding, but that is not given to Black and Brown communities that are just now like proudly wearing a puzzle piece to represent their family member that, a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, they wouldn't have even said they're autistic. And now they're proudly saying they have this autistic person in their family. And so it doesn't excuse the harm that we know that is tied to that, and that's tied to certain organizations and the way in which they operate. But it's so important to have a Black person there and, a Hispanic person, an Asian person, because you don't know the cultural dynamics until it's your culture. And that's the best way to put it. Like, you don't, there are so many people right now that hear code switching and masking, and they're like, oh, my child is code switching. And it's like, your child is white. Your child's not code switching. They're masking. And as a Black person, I know that I have code switched and masked at the same time. So I think that, and I won't like stay on my soapbox so that AJ can chime in, because this is something that really like infuriates me, like when I look at it, because I see just so many times where there's so many of us out there that can add to the conversation and we're just not included. And then when we speak about that lack of representation, it's seen as like we're in the wrong, because it's like we're speaking against all disabled individuals or autistic individuals. And it's like, no, it's just we want to see someone that is like us present too. So.
Yes, thank you so much. AJ, go for it.
All of that. I would first start off with, and I know ASAN is a C3, and these statements are my own. The Trump administration is a white supremacist administration, and they promote eugenics. It is not a surprise that Black people are not represented in all types of spaces, not just disabled spaces. And I think it's important to highlight that ableism and racism are tied together through the string of eugenics, whether that is physical ableism and the killing of Black slaves who are disabled, whether that is intellectual ableism and saying that Black people are mentally inferior and do not have the capacity to take care of themselves. All of those things are wrong. And I think Black people have survived without intrusion or in spite of intrusion of the government for hundreds of years. I think, to Dr. Destiny's point, Black people in their own way, and sometimes it is an ableist way, have protected disabled folks within their community. They may not use the right language or the proper language, but they do in fact protect Black disabled people. Do they do it in a way that I would, as an advocate who works in this space and has been blessed with the opportunity to have access to disabled culture and disabled knowledge and disabled language? Maybe not. But I think the most harmful impact of that is what it's always been, and that's allocation of money and resources. Black people do not need to be educated in white disability, education, research, blah, blah, blah. They need money to support their communities in the way that they always have. Those ways can be improved. Those ways can be critiqued. Those are not flawless, but again, it comes down to money. My issue isn't that Black people aren't represented on the IAC. My issue is that the IAC will give recommendations that will take money out of Black communities to help support Black disabled people. And that is the actual problem. Not necessarily, again, it's wrong that there's no representation, but I will trade no representation if the money is flowing to where it needs to be. But we have seen that without that representation, oftentimes the communities that need the money the most are not getting that money. And that is how I feel about that particular question.
Thank you, AJ. I just want to shout out Natasha is sharing some excellent resources in the chat. Another organization for people to check out is the Color of Autism Foundation, a nonprofit organization committed to supporting underserved families impacted by autism spectrum disorders. As a bridge between families and vital services, we create a robust network within communities of color, fostering connections and providing essential care. Throughout our journey, we've extended resources and assistance to countless families. Our impactful programs revolve around health and human services, education, and awareness initiatives, as well as dedicated outreach and advocacy efforts. And she also shared this really helpful graphic that explains how autism can be interpreted differently in Black people. And she says, honestly, as one of the people who was nominated to be that representation on the IAC, I probably would have moved to meltdown every meeting. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so important, it's not enough given the stakes that you've all described, right? The fact that we are um, in the administration that we're in, it's not enough for our movement to be anti-racist. We have to be pro-Black and pro-Brown, and we have to make sure that people's voices are not just at the table, but also in charge of the resources that are going to their communities and to support their families. So I really appreciate y'all weighing in on that. Um, I'm gonna see if we have any audience questions. I don't think we have any that haven't been answered. In our last few minutes here, are there any resources or just kind of last wrap up thoughts that folks would like to share? If you have like organizations, we can find the links and make sure to like plug those in. But yeah, I just kind of want to open it up for any final thoughts here.
Cole, do you have something prepared? I want to make sure that you get a chance to speak.
Oh, no. No.
Yeah, I can say something right quick. It's not a resource, but I guess a plea or an ask is do not abandon people. Do not throw other people under the bus in hopes that it will save you and your community and your loved ones. They come for all of us all the time in very different ways. Oftentimes it is Black disabled people who are first, specifically Black trans, queer, and gender nonconforming people who oftentimes are disabled. But like, don't think that you are going to save yourself and your community by abandoning other people. It takes full solidarity all the time with all communities and all people, even if you do not like them. Like, that is so important. Like, there are lots of people who I do work with that I do not like. But my protection, and that's just honesty, my protection, my safety, my ability to thrive and be free of white supremacist assholes is dependent on being in solidarity and fighting them with other people. And so my plea is that whether you're an individual or an organization or part of a movement, is to not throw other people under the bus, especially right now, trans people who are getting a full fronted assault by this administration. I know we're talking specifically about autistic people and disabled people. Lots of autistic people are trans. Let's just put that out there, or gender nonconforming. Like, do not throw those people under the bus. Solidarity is so important. We were talking about soapboxes before. Like, I am really adamant about this. Like, you will not protect yourself by giving up on other people. And so that is just my plea and my ask. And sorry I didn't provide resources, but if you email me, I'll send you all the resources.
Thank you, AJ. Absolutely. Yes, 100% to all of that.
Oh, I did. I loved that. No, I just wanted to say, and I think some of the resources I would have provided are in the chat. And oh, thank you, Natasha. I do have my fall virtual neuroaffirming IEP summit coming up in September, and my goal with that is, representation. So I do have neurodivergent speakers. I do have Black and brown speakers. I was like to say, I see speakers that look like me. And I just select like 4 speakers for it, but I do have that coming up. I also did write a book called Neuroaffirming Advocacy that is available. Also, you can find that on my website, and it's about specifically special education neuroaffirming advocacy and how to it talks about motor planning, and it talks about honoring all forms of communication and the tenets of being neuroaffirming and just all those areas. But I think just like piggybacking off of what AJ said, and just what AJ and Cole have shared throughout this webinar is that, access is so important. And I think that we just have to dig deeper and get curious. And I just need anyone who's thinking they are neuroaffirming to know that if you do not, stand for, civil rights and disability advocacy and trans rights and LGBTQIA plus and Black and brown families, and if you do not go against immigration and all those things, you are not neuroaffirming. So I don't know who needs to tell you that, but you are not. If you do not, if you do not stand behind those things and advocate for everyone to have the rights that they deserve. So, but yeah, like I said, Natasha put a lot of stuff in the chat. So those are the resources that I would recommend.
Yeah, Dr.
Amazing.
Destiny, that's such a good point. I'm so sorry, but they use ableism and disability to enforce their fascist immigration. They say you're too disabled to come. They say you are public charge and a drain on the system. And again, racism and ableism are just intertwined in the white supremacist eugenic project. And I just need more people to just understand that and be in solidarity with folks.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you all so much for being here, for sharing your incredible passion and knowledge and experiences. Um, For folks out there, we will be posting a recording of this panel on our YouTube page in a couple of days. So if you want to share it with folks who weren't able to make it, make sure you're following us on social media, sign up for our newsletter to stay up to date on all the goodies and hopefully future resources like this. We're really excited to try to get more parents in the mix, like truly neuro-affirming parents in the mix, as Dr. Huff described. So thank you all for being here, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.